What is up, ninjas? OJ over here from PlayerEssence, and welcome to my village of Nintendo Switch and gaming news. Today we've got some awesome information for you, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So, Sine Mora EX has been rated for release on the Nintendo Switch. So, Grasshopper manufacturer / Digital Realities developed shooter Sine Mora looks to be coming to Nintendo Switch. A Brazilian rating board has shown that Sine Mora EX will be coming to Nintendo Switch, courtesy of THQ Nordic. Now, I don't know much about this game when it originally launched. I have never heard about it. This is the first time that I'm even hearing anything about it, but it does seem like a pretty cool shoot 'em up based on this trailer, and the game is quite a number of years old at this point. There's a trailer back from 2012 that I was watching, and it looks cool. We'll see when THQ Nordic has to announce anything. Maybe they're going to talk about it a little bit at the Nintendo Direct coming up. Maybe there'll be some type of sizzle reel for upcoming games, so we'll see when this title is released, and I would love to see if I can actually get an early or preview copy for you guys so I can check it out on the Nintendo Switch. So I'll definitely have my eye out on this one, guys. Alright, and moving on to the next topic here. XSEED says that they're big Nintendo Switch supporters and there will be announcements soon. So this is coming from a customer service rep over at XSEED. So quotations, we are big supporters of the Nintendo Switch, so you'll definitely be seeing some announcements about it from us soon. Though it may not specifically be for titles and series you're looking for. So I wonder what they're talking about here. Are they bringing new IPs over to the Nintendo Switch? Are they handling other type of titles, ports from PS4 or Xbox One that Japanese developers are doing and want them to bring over on the Nintendo Switch? I wonder what they're going to be doing here. Now, what I'm thinking is just that. I'm thinking XSEED is working with other developers in order to bring over certain maybe PS3 or PS4 titles that never saw release on the Wii, Wii U, or the Nintendo Switch at this point, and bringing those over. And I think that's why he said specifically for titles or series that maybe you're not looking for, something different, because they are looking into bringing in something from the Japanese developers over there onto Nintendo Switch. That's the only thing that I can think of and why they would say that, just because it doesn't make sense any other way. Really excited for XSEED just because they were one of the ones who actually helped bring over The Last Story on the Nintendo Wii, and that is one of my favorite Nintendo Wii games, and it would be awesome if there was The Last Story 2 or even an HD remake on the Nintendo Switch. That would be phenomenal if they did that, but I doubt it will happen just because of Miss Walker and everything, and I don't even know what that studio is doing. But still, XSEED is a great publisher / developer, localizer, whatever the heck you want to call them, and I can't wait to see what they have to offer on the Nintendo Switch. This post definitely has me very intrigued. Alright, and lastly, we're going to get into a little bit of a showdown between Japanese AAA developers and Western AAA developers. Now, of course, in the West, specifically the US and in parts of Europe, obviously, the big Western games always get a lot of the shine in the media. A lot of people always like to talk about them. Those are the biggest regions when it comes to the US. Europe is obviously a huge region as well. And sometimes people say, hey, Japan has fallen off. There's not really as many titles out there. They're not as good as the Western titles, especially towards the end of the 7th generation, mid 7th generation. You started seeing that. Japanese developers just didn't adjust over to HD development as quickly as Western developers. So you saw Western developers get a huge jump on them, especially compared to the previous gen, the 6th gen with PS2, GameCube, and Xbox. Now, it does seem like the 7th and 8th gen were somewhat recovery periods for Japanese developers, although they did a nice job towards the end of the 7th gen in terms of titles. And even on the Wii, a lot of obscure titles that a lot of people didn't play that came from Japanese developers that were actually really good. Now with the 8th gen, we're seeing a little bit of a stagnation as well. At the beginning, wasn't quite so much, but things have turned around, and it has turned around in a hurry. And I think the biggest reason why it's turned around with Japanese developers is because they're really focused on gameplay. After they have honed down their engines, what they're targeting, what they're looking for, they're really looking at the gameplay and not worrying too much about graphics this, graphics that. That's the only thing that I can think of. The jump between PS3 and PS4 or Xbox 360 and Xbox One was a good jump, but in my opinion, it wasn't big enough for what these developers, as far as their ambitions when it comes to Western developers. Therefore, you see them focusing on other things instead of the actual gameplay. You see them trying to maximize and squeeze every single bit of juice out of these systems instead of really just focusing on what makes a game great. And I think that's where Japanese developers have really caught up. We're going to go over a couple of scores with some of the most recent games dating back to the end of 2016 and early 2017. Starting from the bottom, we're going to put up a few titles here. So we have Tales of Berseria. These are all Metacritic numbers here, 79 average, in addition to Final Fantasy 15, that actually had like an 80 or 81 average. Mass Effect Andromeda, that was a massive franchise for the PS3 and Xbox 360, with Mass Effect 2 having, I think, like a 95 or 96 Metacritic rating, one of the best games rated of all time, and you can see how much that has dropped. Tales of Berseria and Final Fantasy obviously doing better than that. Also, moving on, you have Yakuza, which has an 85 on Metacritic, and you can compare that to Torment Tides of Mora, which has a 77. Even if you go over to Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands, this is supposed to be a AAA development studio with Ubisoft, and on Metacritic, they are a 72. Of course, not bad, but compared to like the Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, which is somewhat of a, not rebirth, but somewhat of a new taking on what you're doing with that franchise, compared to Ghost Recon, which is something kind of different than what they've done with that franchise before. You got an 86 over there with Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, and there's even more here, and this is where it gets into the higher tier. We have Persona 5 with a 94%, easily beating any game that's on here, compared to Halo Wars 2, a 79. That's supposed to be a big franchise out there with Microsoft, only a 79%. You also look at Sniper Elite 4, 77%. Even move up to For Honor. Once again, Ubisoft, supposed to be a big AAA developer. 79, not bad. 77, 79, 70s, these are not bad, but not what you expect from AAA development, right? Especially compared to what we saw last generation on the PS3 and Xbox 360 with Mass Effect and some of the other games out there. Even if you go a little bit further, Horizon Zero Dawn, which is the highest rated game out of the slot when it comes to Western developers, and that's at an 89, and that's pretty close to Nier Automata and Neo, both of those games at 88s, and just so fast-paced, so much content, so much things to do in both of those games. And I have played Neo a little bit, haven't got to play a ton of Neo, and I've played Nier Automata just a bit, still need to get back into that one, but I've been sinking a ton of time into Persona 5. I've had a lot of time into The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and all of those games, those four ones right there, Neo, Nier Automata, Persona 5, and Legend of Zelda, absolutely crush anything that I've played when it comes from Western developers, AAA developers. We're not talking about the smallers or indies, obviously the ones that don't have as much money and resources to put into their games, but we're talking about the bigger developers here. Those four games absolutely crush anything that I've played on PS4 or Xbox One this whole generation. And I've played a lot of different games on there. Obviously, Horizon Zero Dawn is the big game that a lot of people are saying that is really good, and I've played a bit of it as well, but it just didn't move me. It just didn't grab me. There's just not a lot of substance, in my opinion. There's a lot of great graphics. It looks good. A lot of these games, great graphics, they have some good mechanics here and there, but there's no style or flavor or soul into their games, and that's what you're seeing with stuff like Persona 5. From the minute you boot it up, there's so much style. It's ridiculously stylish and just so innovative with some of the mechanics and what you do in terms of the gameplay. Even with Nier Automata, not anything crazy in that game, but so solid, awesome action. It really does tie in well. Not quite as good as Bayonetta 2 in my opinion, but still a very good game from Platinum Games and like an action RPG realm. Same goes with Neo. Very good game in the action RPG realm with a lot of content, leveling, building up, new equipment, all these different things, and of course the big one is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. That is actually my favorite game of all time at this point, tied with Chrono Trigger. Those two are at the top. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is better than anything that I've played on PS4, Xbox One, heck, or even Wii U before The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild came out on Wii U. So this is including Nintendo as well. I'm seeing a lot of the Japanese and Eastern developers really catch up, but not only did they catch up, they caught up in a hurry and passed them up, because remember, there was a slump. Obviously, Persona was delayed multiple times. Final Fantasy 15 has been delayed forever. It was delayed, and delayed. Tales of Berseria had a little bit of a long stretch to get to where it's at, considering where the previous Tales games, Vesperia, and what happened with those games and what they did. Those games just didn't do very well when it comes to the fan base. And then you also have Resident Evil having a rebirth after the horrible Resident Evil 6. I did not like that game at all. And even some people said that Resident Evil 5 was kind of going downhill a little bit, but that game still reviewed very well, at least compared to Resident Evil 6. And then you look at Nier Automata bringing that type of game back. These type of scores are reflective of kind of how the Japanese developers are just doing so much work at this point and really catching up and making great games. I also forgot to add on here, Gravity Rush 2 is also at an 80 as well. But the biggest thing to me, like I said, with all these games, none of these games are graphical powerhouses. None of these games are really going to push 4K gaming to the limits or anything like that, but what they all do is focus on great game mechanics and execute on them and give you tons and tons and tons of replay value and content. If you look at all of them, they're all at least minimum, with the exception of Resident Evil, 30-hour plus games that you could put more time into. And obviously with Persona and with Nier Automata, Nioh, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, you can spend hundreds of hours in those games depending on what you do. More Legend of Zelda and Persona, definitely spending a ton of time in those huge RPG worlds. Obviously there's some great games. I'm not trying to say that PS4, Xbox One, Western development is bad or anything like that. Definitely not trying to say that, but there's just been a lot of disappointments at this point, especially for me, because Mass Effect 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. It's right up there, top 3 of all time. And then you look at Mass Effect Andromeda and you're like, well, we have like a 25-point drop from Mass Effect 2 to Mass Effect Andromeda, and even like Mass Effect 3 did way better Metacritic-wise. And like, what's going on? To me, you're focusing on other things. You're not focusing on the actual content and the gameplay. Now, we'll see what happens going forward in the future. Obviously, Nintendo's going to keep cranking out some great games. We got Mario Kart 8 Deluxe coming out. We do have ARMS and Splatoon. Those are going to be a little bit more wild cards when it comes to ARMS, that is. Splatoon's looking good as always. We have Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and a number of other games that are going to be coming out from Japanese developers. So we'll see what happens going forward. And Western developers, they're definitely bringing some games too. I know there's going to be a lot of stuff at this year's E3. We have Star Wars Battlefront 2. I know the first one necessarily wasn't everyone's cup of tea. We'll see what happens with that game there. And we also have Destiny 2 as well. Once again, it kind of underperformed with the first game, even though it was super hyped up. So I'm pretty sure those sequels will be better, but it'll be interesting just to see how good they end up being compared to the first games. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Go ahead and hit that like button if you did like it. Let me know you guys want more content like this going forward in the future. And subscribe to PlayerEssence for the latest news, reviews, discussions, and more. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you ninjas for the next video. Peace!